The story of this moment has drawn from recent webinars by Flow Water Advocates, Oil and Water Don't Mix, and Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities. The speakers are experts, lawyers, tribal members, and advocates for Great Lakes and climate protection.
So after the Kalamazoo oil spill, activists, indigenous communities and leaders and folks across the state came together and really started looking at Enbridge's pipeline infrastructure. And that's when my good friend Beth Wallace of National Wildlife Federation put together the Sunken Hazard Report, which really started revealing the problems with Line 5.
Almost immediately following that spill, the federal oversight dubbed Enbridge as having a culture of deviance. We've heard that already today. And they acted as the keystone cops for the spill. They were unprepared. And it was not only the lead up to the spill what caused the disaster, their lack of seeing that there was a rupture occurring, but it was also the behavior following.
We all know that the 72-year-old pipelines are bruised, they're battered, they've been dented, they've been struck by anchors and pulled by cables. And we're really, frankly, very fortunate that an anchor fluke hasn't caught a pipeline in the past and severed the pipelines, resulting in disaster.
Line 5 runs 23 million gallons of oil a day. According to Enbridge's own experts, the fastest Enbridge could shut down this pipeline is in 23 minutes. In 23 minutes, we'd lose at least 500,000 gallons of oil into the Straits.
We are racking our brains and thinking each and every day about how we can be doing things better, how we can be moving the resolution.
So construction of a tunnel to enclose a new pipeline and protect it is not on its face unreasonable, though there are much better alternatives to Line 5 at all.
Enbridge itself could actually take a few simple steps that would take care of all the crude oil that is supplied in this area. It has steadfastly refused to do so because it's not in its interest. But it has about 100,000 barrels of spare capacity on its Line 78, which supplies the same refineries as Line 5.
When you have Enbridge testifying under oath, you really learn the facts and you know that this pipeline is not needed and that there are much smarter, better alternatives to go around the Great Lakes.
So how did the tunnel project materialize? Well, at the end of the Rick Snyder administration, at the very end of 2018, the state of Michigan entered into 3 contracts with Enbridge. Under these agreements, Enbridge would build the tunnel. Once completed, the Mackinac Straits Corridor Authority would own the tunnel. Enbridge would be responsible for operation and maintenance, and the state would be responsible in perpetuity for oversight of the entire operation.
Enbridge has no history of building tunnels. They are ditch diggers. They dig 6 feet down, put a pipeline in the ground, and cover it with dirt. When they've had to do more than that, when they've done directional drilling in Minnesota in the summer of 2021, when they forced Line 3 through indigenous lands, their directional drilling techniques failed over half the time. They breached artisan aquifers. They had drilling mud spills left and right.
Enbridge has no tunneling experience. They have no plan to even ventilate the tunnel properly. They have no plan for fire suppression. Their plan to stop a fire is to close both ends of the tunnel and let it burn itself out.
These are the people who we're going to trust to build a tunnel under over 90% of the world's fresh water.
The construction of a tunnel bored underwater represents one of the most complex and high-risk activities in civil engineering, particularly in unpredictable geological conditions.
As a geological engineer with nearly 40 years of tunnel experience, I have deep concerns about this project. First of all, nobody puts oil and gas pipelines in a tunnel because it's a confined space and it's subject to fire, explosions, and disaster.
The most frequently reported cause of tunnel collapse is unpredicted geology. Through 2021, there were 321 tunnel collapses documented worldwide, with 92% of them occurring in the construction phase, mostly due to encountering adverse geological conditions.
The idea of putting the pipeline in the tunnel was conditioned on the Enbridge doing an adequate study of the geology They didn't do that. The study that they did complete showed that the rock was extremely poor quality. The groundwater pressures and infiltration rates would be exceedingly high, and they found methane in the groundwater.
There were an inadequate number of borings, far less than industry standards require. Most of the core samples were taken from an area above the tunnel pathway and didn't penetrate to the area where the actual tunnel would be built.
All Enbridge did is they get a data dump and they're leaving it to us to figure out what the risks are.
The Army Corps of Engineers had to state, ultimately in their draft environmental impact statement, quote, conditions along several portions of the alignment are currently unknown.
It's not uncommon when you're driving a tunnel, sometimes the ground conditions are so bad, they just abandon the mining machine and they just quit. And that could easily happen out here because of the lack of studies.
In 2003, at the Detroit River Outfall number 2 project, a tunnel boring machine was abandoned, actually, after water inflows overwhelmed the project and there was the dangerous presence of hydrogen sulfide gas. In that project, they encountered 5 atmospheres of pressure. Recall that I stated earlier that there will be almost 17 atmospheres of pressure in this project. We know now, and it is well established, that this project may encounter the highest groundwater pressure ever found in a tunnel construction project worldwide.
The tunnel boring machine is going to be under some pressure, and it will actually be pushing a slurry around it. And if they overpressurize that slurry, it could break up through the rock, through the sediments, and contaminate the lake bottom. So that's one concern. If they underpressurize and too much ground goes into the tunnel, again, they will cause a sinkhole, which could undermine the existing pipelines and cause a complete failure or rupture. And it'll be much worse than the river disaster that they had. They also failed to identify that the Straits is actually sitting over the Collingwood shale gas formation. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about shale gas, all the fracking. That's where they're pulling out most of the natural gas. So we have a huge natural gas deposit that is thickest directly under the Straits. And that wasn't even discussed in this geotechnical data report that they put together. So shale gas is lighter than air, so that means it moves upwards. So eventually it's going to make its way to the surface, and it will make its way into the rocks that this tunnel will be drilled through. I'm concerned about the workers, okay? There's been a lot of talk about the labor union supporting this, but I don't think they understand the true risks to them going down into the tunnel to build the tunnel. So they're counting on engineers, they're counting on the regulators to make sure the Enbridge design is safe. And right now, their proposed design is much less safe than what was approved by the state of Michigan in 2017.
So in the worst case, this tunneling exercise could have a blowout or a tunnel collapse that could even undermine the operation of the existing pipelines. The bottom line is that there is significant risk that the tunnel project will fail in its construction phase.
Construction of the tunnel would bring dozens of adverse impacts to the entire Straits of Mackinac region for 6 years and beyond. Areas from the Headlands International Dark Sky Park, residents and businesses on both sides of the Straits, up to the Hiawatha National Forest will be affected. Tunnel construction impacts were detailed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers draft environmental impact statement, including noise from construction, blasting, and drilling. 564 truck trips will pound local roads every day for 6 years. 355 workers will increase local traffic. Air quality will suffer from equipment, generators, employee commuting trips, and deliveries. 434-foot tall cranes will be visible above the tree line. Vibrations will disturb wildlife and aquatic species. The construction will cause concerning impacts to water, land, housing, community services, and tourism. Permanent impacts to the Straits go beyond the 416,000 cubic yards of material to be removed from the construction zone. Drilling has the potential to cause shifts in geology in the Straits. There will be over 4 acres of permanent wetland loss. 19 acres of vegetation removal includes almost 8 acres of protected species habitat. It will cause adverse effects on archaeological sites and tribal cultural resources.
This thing is an environmental disaster in the making, in the most beautiful freshwater in the world. It comes with a huge climate cost. All that oil is, $1 billion a year worth of climate damage over 4 decades. It would release millions upon millions of metric tons of CO2 every year. Over the last 5 years, we've crossed some invisible line where the cost of producing energy from the sun and the wind has dropped below the cost of producing it by burning coal or gas or oil. How stupid is it to put up a potentially century-long fossil fuel infrastructure project right at the moment that the rest of the world is headed in the entirely different direction? We should be winding down our fossil fuel infrastructure, not building it anew.
Traditional indigenous law is geared towards restitution and restoration. We consider all the natural world to have life. The world can live without us, but we cannot live without the existence of all the rest of creation.
Nobody so far in this permitting process has looked at the actual environmental impacts of building a tunnel through the most sensitive part of the bottomlands of the Great Lakes. So we're hopeful that Eagle is going to do that this time.
This permit requires evaluation under Part 303, the Wetlands Protection Act, and Part 325, the Great Lakes Submerged Lands Act, as well as supplemental compliance with the Michigan Environmental Protection Act, or MEPA. Written comments on the project are due on or before August 29th.
This is our moment. Right now, Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy has the authority and responsibility to assess the actual environmental risks and impacts of drilling a tunnel through the Straits of Mackinac. We need a comprehensive environmental review by the state agency responsible for protecting the bottomlands of our Great Lakes. But they need to hear from you. They need to hear that the public will not accept another rubber stamp approval. They need to know that we demand the complete protection of our public trust waters.